for being here today. Our next session today on the Operations and AI stage is Kelly Slessor, where we'll be talking about transformation is a myth, execution wins. So this is Kelly, founder of TribeGen AI, and yeah, I'll hand over to Kelly now.
Can everybody hear me? I might just grab a handheld mic because I like to wander and it's quite noisy in here. It's hard for me to hear myself even think, let alone talk. Is it all good? Okay, cool. All right. I'll just grab and then I can pace around. Sorry, that was totally on me. I should have said it first. How noisy it was going to be. Is that better? Okay, everyone can hear me. Amazing. All right, just a very quick, boring introduction on me. I'm Kelly Slessor, founder of TribeGen AI. Been in retail and tech for 30 years now. Been working with AI for about 10 years. I trained with the guy that trained the guys that did the algorithm for Instagram, BJ Fogg, who, hi. BJ Fogg, who has now gone off to do better stuff with his life and has built a book called Healthy Habits, which is all about creating amazing habits. Hi. And so back 10 years ago, I built an AI platform, a shopping platform. It was a personalization engine. And it came off the back of me really wanting to build something that reflected you, that was personally reflected you. I'd worked at Westfield for a number of years, and at Westfield I got very annoyed with the fact that we just continued to shove items and products onto websites, and they weren't necessarily connecting with the people at the other end, which is shown by still our conversion rate in the industry. And so I developed an algorithm that was about connecting to people, was about personalization. Fast forward 10 years, and I now work with brands on helping them enable AI throughout their business and build out AI solutions that actually get a return on investment. So my subject today, and Laura tasked me with this, and I kind of sat and thought about it for a while, and my subject today is about transformation being a myth, because I think what I'm seeing in the industry at the moment, and this is from multi-million-dollar globally listed organizations right down to your butchers, your bakers, and your candlestick makers, I'm seeing that organizations are seeing this as a transformational change project. And yes, it will be a transformation, and yes, it is a transformation, but a lot of organizations are spending too much time thinking about the transformational change and not enough on the execution piece. And we're in an era where we've just got to get going. We've got to move with this stuff, because in 18 months, the landscape and everything will change. What you are doing today will not be what you are doing in 18 months. From a personal perspective, from a job perspective, it will fundamentally change the way we work and live. And I'm hoping for most of us, or for all of us, it's going to be a good thing. It's going to be a positive thing. So I'll run you through some examples, and I'll run you through some things that have changed. But I don't know if everyone's seen this. Has everyone seen the changes that have happened in the last few weeks? So the Shopify now connects to Claude and to ChatGPT. So there's a connector that basically you just plug in. Whereas previously we had to kind of build out connectors, and it was a bit technical and it was a bit hard. Now you, anyone in this room, or your e-commerce, head of e-commerce, or anyone in your team can push a button and Shopify's connected in. There's some good points and some bad points about that, and we'll talk about it in a minute. ChatGPT Images just launched. 2.0, and that's insane. Meta Ads MCP, so now you can connect your Meta Ads to things like Claude and ChatGPT really easily. And Claude Opus 4.7. They also launched another model, which they didn't actually launch publicly because they said it was too dangerous. However, ChatGPT went and then launched their model. So I think the point is, at the moment, I'm finding that trying to keep up with this level of change is bloody exhausting. And I think, really being clear about where you focus your energy and time is probably one of the most important things you can do in this era at the moment. So Shopify just did that connector, and that launched the last few days. And basically what it means is that you can say, audit our spring collection against real shoppers' questions. So there's been a lot of content around AI visibility in the last couple of days. And if I go back 10 years ago when we built out the AI platform, what we tried to do with that AI platform was just create real conversation. We didn't want people to have to search for just a red dress and white shoes. We wanted context. We wanted to understand why they wanted the red dress, what it was for, what event they were going to, you know, whether they liked the shape of their butt or their arms or not. And we wanted to understand and give them something personalized in return. And that's what's happening now in this new era of Shopify and the new era of AI visibility. What AI visibility essentially does is answer real people's real questions. So do these shoes go with this outfit? Is this outfit right for my office? If you can answer those questions on your store, you're going to put yourself in a position where you start to rank at the top in AI visibility. So coming back to this Shopify connector, what you are now able to do, if I go back 2 weeks ago, you had to either be a bit techie and understand how to do your MCP connection and plug it in, and then you could review the products on your site and you could get it to write some better product descriptions. Fast forward 2 weeks, only 2 weeks, and at the click of a button, I can say, audit our spring collection against the questions that real shoppers ask. It will go and do the web research for me. It will go to Reddit. It will go to Instagram. It will go and find out what people are asking for in terms of outfits or food or whatever it might be. Surface those real questions. Rewrite our top product pages in our brand voice, because it's got my context of my brand, and answer those questions. All of a sudden, in 3 or 4 weeks, I'm starting to rise up the ranks in my AI visibility. And that whole project took me less than a few hours. Going back a few weeks ago, it probably took me a few weeks. Going back a year ago, it probably took me 6 months, and therefore I wouldn't do it. And so now we've got this capability. One of the things I would say, and what I'm seeing brands, in the last couple of days, I'm seeing brands using it for things like products and inventory, so looking at their inventory and making smart decisions around that. Discounts and promos, being able to activate and decide whether to run discounts and promos. Orders and customer queries. But what I would say is, and this is just the plugin, so you go to connectors, you click on Claude Connector, browse your connections, and you've got all these connected in there. Same thing applies to ChatGPT, and you hit go button. Now, there's a danger here that I'm going to warn you about, and if you've got teams and e-commerce people that are pushing that button in the back end, just be very clear with them, because one of the dangers of this is if I went to it now and said, create me a collection page or update my product pages, it will, in live real time, update my product pages. And no one wants Claude updating your product pages in live real time without human intervention. So the way in which we're using this is we're asking it to create draft copy before we say, yes, go and publish too. So I think it's just being clear with your teams that you've put guardrails around these things and told your teams that pressing that button and then telling it to do something could land you in a really dangerous situation and potentially end up with you making false claims about things that you weren't even aware you were making claims about. So now is not only a time for amazing opportunity and only being limited by your creativity, it's also a time to get really clear on the guardrails for your team, because we're at this messy middle bit where one button mistake, one push can have quite big implications for the organization. The second thing that happened in the last week is Meta opened its MCP. So now what you can do again with Claude, with ChatGPT, you can connect straight into Meta. Now that starts to question some of the agency models in this advertising space, because if you can really look at your own ads, run your own analysis, decide which ads are performing, underperforming, what creative needs to be rewritten, do you need that agency? And I'll come back to that in a minute. The answer is maybe. And sometimes yes, but I'll come back to that in a second. But now you've got the ability to do that. And hopefully, if you've got a good agency, it's just holding everything accountable. The third one that happened is ChatGPT launched their new image generation model. Now, I've been talking about image generation for a very, very long time, and I get very, very excited about image generation. And the reason is because up until about a week ago, we weren't that good at it. The algorithms weren't that good at it. They could create an image for you, but as an e-commerce brand or a retail brand, taking your image and repurposing that, you still needed designers to keep the consistency of the product. So especially in fashion products, you still need that consistency of product. And we all know if we go back 2 years, you've got 6 fingers and 3 legs and, you know, all of that weird stuff happening in imagery, and it's got so much better, but it wasn't quite at the point where at scale you could use those images in e-com, in your campaigns. But with the new ChatGPT 2 that has just launched, that has fundamentally changed. And what's really interesting, and this is the bit about keeping up and being across these tools, is we've built API connections into things like Nano Banana so that we could do this image generation at scale. And it's not always, you know, your front images in terms of your Instagram or it might actually be just using them to prototype some of your products in the back end or to get runway images. What we have done in the last couple of weeks is switch from Nano Banana to ChatGPT 2 because the quality and consistency is skies above anything else I've ever seen. So if I just show you the one that we just produced, which was just taking trainers. If I was to zoom in on that, I haven't asked it to keep the product integrity, but if we ask it to keep the product integrity, the product itself remains very, very consistent. Like you cannot tell the difference, and a designer looking at it can't tell the difference. So one of the ways we are using that at the moment is we are using it to test out various creative. I've got a food brand that I work with. And what we're doing is we're testing it in their ads. We're running those ads through the machine. And we're using it to create different imagery that we can run at scale. And then basically the Meta connector will tell us whether those ads are working or not. And then we just redo the images. But we can do that quickly and at scale. Now, some of you may say, you know, the imagery is part of our brand. We're never going to use AI to do that. And that's okay. Because if that is your brand, I do think that integrity of brand is important. But equally, if you are selling a product here and someone else is selling a product down the road and they're able to be more efficient, create more ads at scale, deliver more content to the right people, they are going to win. And so what I would do is challenge yourself on where you can use AI to create that efficiency and scale. There's a lot of fear around AI at the moment. The first one is obviously the job loss. And I'm seeing this with a lot of teams that I work with. And actually, it's the middle layer. The younger teams that I work with are bloody excited. They're jumping in. They're playing with it. You know, I've got CEOs that have got OpenClaw in their back office in a very dark room, and they're playing with these new tools but not quite telling anyone about it. But that middle layer is very, very scared of the job loss. And therefore, that fear comes out in statements like, AI could never do this job. Oh, we don't quite get the creative integrity that we get from AI. Oh, it's not possible to use it in that way. Oh, no, I've tried that. And so for me, part of this journey is really working with your teams on those fears and getting them to overcome some of those fears. Because if you can't get them to overcome those fears, it's going to leave you behind. I'm on a panel at the end of the week, and I was talking to a CEO yesterday, and he basically ran a social experiment in his organization. And this was quite scary, and I found it quite confronting, even for an AI person. He ran a social experiment for 2 months. And he basically gave his team all the tools, and he said, we're gonna track you over the next 2 months. We're going to track who's using it. We want you to get on board. We're going to encourage you to use it in every situation. And one of the hosts said, and what happened at the end of the 2 months? He said, well, the people that didn't get on board are no longer in the roles. And that was it. That was as cold and as clear as he was about his organization going forward. And that hurts my soul a little bit, because as an AI solution provider, what I believe is that this frees us up to be more human. This isn't about going through and cutting people. This is about freeing up your good people to do more of the great stuff. So what disappears? The repetitive admin, manual reporting. One of the biggest ways we're using AI to save time, and someone actually mentioned it at the Yotpo lunch before, was trade packs, reporting. Like, who wants to copy and paste from one spreadsheet to another? Why have we even got bloody spreadsheets anymore? I don't understand. It feels like a holding house for noise. So one of the ways we're using it is to really create these interactive dashboards where leaders, senior teams, executives can actually make decisions based on the data, can interrogate the data and ask, how did that store perform this week? And why do you think it didn't perform in line with that store? What were we doing in that store? And then go and take those changes and implement them. It's one of the first things I'm seeing that is actually giving people time back in their roles, because no one wants to be producing reports, unless anyone does, please. No? Okay, great. What gets harder is the general roles, the I just operate tools. And there's a genius guy called Matthew Byrne, who Rick Leathers introduced me to. And he talks about human intelligence. And he talks about the fact that we've got, at the bottom of the triangle, we've got taskmasters. And they're the people that come in and do the task for us. And then overlaid on top of that, you've got essentially the strategy. And then as you get up the triangle, you should do more strategy work, more people work, and less of the tasks. Because the challenge is AI will replace the tasks. And if we are caught in the tasks, and that is what we own, and that is where we belong, that's the bit in the middle where it gets harder to own your role. It's the strategic thinking, the creativity, the human stuff, the emotion that we need to start really doubling down on and getting better at. And what gets more valuable is judgment, customer relationships, and process design. And we talk about token costs. This is coming up a lot lately. People are going, what's the cost of a token? How is that going to impact my business? In 6 months' time, I'm spending all this money on tokens. But if we look at a customer service experience officer that costs $85K a week, now I'm not saying we should get rid of them, because good customer service officers are gold bloody dust. But if we look at the cost of that, and we say a Claude seat and tokens for a year to answer your basic questions that should be being answered by AI right now, the repetitive questions, the cost of the tokens are about $3,500, whereas the cost of another hire is about $85K. And I'm not saying you shouldn't hire or you should replace, but what I'm saying is free those people up to do more of the emotional connectivity with people and less of that task, answering the same questions over and over again, day in, day out. We're right in the messy middle at the moment. I don't know if any of you are feeling this, but a lot of the people I work with are in AI burnout. We're trying to run business as usual. We're trying to do our bloody day jobs. We're trying to make progress, increase revenue, reduce costs. At the same time, we're trying to learn a whole nother full-time job. And I speak to people on a daily basis. I get the person that says, I'll get to it. I really need to do that. I'll get there. And then you get the person that's deep in it and is forgetting about business as usual and running after shiny stuff. And then you've got the person that sits somewhere in between, that I see is where the progress is being made. They're dedicating time each week to learning the tools, to learning about AI, and to learning how they can implement it in their business, but they're not being distracted by the shiny. Where we're at the moment is that we are at a stage where it's a marathon. This is not a sprint. Yes, we do have 18, well, it is a sprint. It's a marathon made up of sprints. We have about an 18-month window. I keep saying this over and over again, and every day I wake up and I see 100 different news articles and I feel like the 18-month window is getting shorter and shorter. But we have about an 18-month window. Doesn't mean you have to do everything as an organization tomorrow. But again, with the organizations I'm working with, what I'm finding is if you pick one painful process at a time, you do it in short sprints, and you bring the people with you. That's where we're getting the biggest wins. Where I see organizations going, we're putting in an agent that's going to do this for you. You hear that stat all the time, and I'm sure you'll hear it over the next couple of days, and I kind of roll my eyes, but it's the one where it goes, 80% of AI projects fail. They actually don't. They're just not integrated with the people and the business, and there's not a clear vision of where it needs to get to. So in terms of rolling out AI functions across your business, it's doing it in short sprints and knowing when to kill it. Knowing when you go, that actually doesn't work for us, or that actually didn't solve the problem we thought we were going to solve. So I wrote a book on AI for e-commerce, but I taught a whole chapter. I speak about making AI measurable. You know, I see a lot of companies that will go, we really need to improve this creative process with no measurements behind it. How do we know whether we've improved the creative process or not? How do we know whether we've got a return on investment? And the other piece in this messy middle is rethinking how we do business. So this morning, I was doing this presentation, and normally I do it on PowerPoint, and I'm like, why am I doing it on PowerPoint? Again, PowerPoint's just a holding place. I was working with a client, and the client spent about 3 days trying to take their weekly reporting pack, build it in Claude, and then export it into a PowerPoint. And the client is a young guy, and he's really excited, and he's like, I've built it into PowerPoint, and I'm like, that's great, but why are we building PowerPoint? I killed his buzz. I'm really sorry, but why do we need PowerPoint? Why can't you build an interactive presentation that looks great? So I think one of the key things is rethinking your outputs. Do you need Excel spreadsheets? Do you need PowerPoint? All of those things that feel like they hold us back at the moment and just create more noise and time and create more places to look. Is there a way that you could rethink that in your business? So one of the things we do when we do workshops is we get everyone to kind of step away from the old way of thinking and think about what going forward looks like. The agency model. So Laura Doonan and I debate this a lot. And we sit on two sides of the fence. I think Laura's brought me round to her way of thinking through literally aggression and just shouting at me. No, I'm just kidding. But I think the agency model will be restructured in the next year. The outsourced, I'm going to give you everything, you're going to use AI at a cheaper cost is not going to work going forward. And it will question the commercial viability of the agency model. So one of the things we're looking at with agencies is how do you encourage, for the agencies that you love working with, how do you encourage them to really integrate AI into their business, but also look at the commercial model to make sure you get the benefits from it? So agencies aren't dead, they are just going to fundamentally transform. And the question I would be asking all of your agencies that you're either bringing on board, you're interviewing at the moment, or that you're already working with, is what does their AI roadmap look like? But also, how are they using your your data in their AI roadmap? And what are they allowing to access your AI data? Again, guardrails at the beginning. There's 3 stages, and most teams are stuck on one. So solo tools. And there's nothing wrong with this, but it's let's build an agent that does this. That's what we're kind of doing today. Let's build a tool that does this for us and use AI. Or let's just use it to prompt and response for emails and things like that. where we are moving to, and the view that I have, is that we will move to a situation where we have a brain. And this is what I'm building out with clients. You have a brain where all of your documentation sits, your brand guidelines, your tone of voice, your customer personas. And rather than building out solo agents, because if you think about the way your organizations work, it's silos. You've got finance here, creative here, marketing here, e-com here. And when they have a meeting, they talk, but the data is not flowing between them. And they have a version of your brand guidelines, and these guys over here have a version of your customer persona. So it's really building out a brain that has all of that knowledge that you hold as an organization in one central place, so that as you start to build out your AI infrastructure, as you start to build out your AI layer, everything feeds off of that brain. So everyone's talking to the same central source of data, as opposed to creating new sources of data which will sit in Google Drive or SharePoint and have multiple versions of it. I'll show you quickly, how long have I got, by the way? 10 minutes, okay. I'll show you quickly a view of that. The idea is that you build this connected brain that has this information in it, that when LLMs start to question your brand, start to say, should I surface, this company for trainers or sneakers or dresses, that the consistency of message is across every single department and every single output that you put out there, because it comes from one central source. One of the biggest problems I see with brands is the inconsistency of message across channels and the disconnect between what the brand stands for, who the brand is. You've got those founders where the passion is there, and you hear it and you see it when they get up on stage and talk about what they do. And then you go to their Instagram and you're like, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting. It's connecting that in one central hub so that everything feeds off it. Once you've got the brain, you're like a superpower. You can then build agents off it. You can then build this trade pack producer, a creative producer, an email marketing producer. But having that central knowledge is the bit that we are missing in brands at the moment. So in terms of what's going into the brain, if I think about the ones that we're building out at the moment, the things that are going into the brain are brand voice, your process documents, skills files. So skills files is basically a kind of personalized prompt that tells it, what to do, how to do it, why to do it, in your tone of voice. Business rules. What are your trading rules? What does good look like for your business? Is it, if we get to the end of a week and we're up 5% on last year, does that look good? Or up 5% on last week? Is minus 3% critical measures? We need all hands on deck to turn this around. So what are your business rules? And again, what's really fascinating is going through this process and trying to collect this brain data is how many organizations actually don't have it or don't know it. And you're challenging people to think a bit differently about their organizations. And then building the agents off the side. So imagine logging in tomorrow. And I'm going to show you a quick demo of this. And you know what demos are like. They never quite work, do they? But let's hope they do. So I'm a real big fan of a tool called Replit. There's other tools out there, but Replit is probably one of my favorite. What Replit allows you to do is to build prototypes really quickly. And when you're doing kind of a 6 to 8 week sprint on a particular project, you can build the look and feel, because as humans, we process touchy-feely things more than we process a diagram that gives us a technical architecture or solutions architecture. It allows your teams to play with things, to tell you that doesn't work. To give you an example, we've just used Replit to build a trade pack generator and a tech pack generator. And it's allowed the team to get in and go, oh no, that doesn't work. The sizing and measurement's wrong. We've connected it to things like Claude. We've connected it. The thing I love about Replit is it's very easy to connect to other tools. So I can connect it into Klaviyo, into Shopify, into very, very easy to do. So let's say, for instance, you wanted to build one of the apps, Nina, that Kate built. It was a Playdate app. So she sells cubby houses for kids. So she used Replit to test out a Playdate app, which organised playdates for the kids and surfaces ideas for kids of age 5, or you could pick your kids' ages, what they like to do, and then it would connect you into ideas for, creative and things like that. She was able to test that out in basically the space of a day after playing around and building it in Replit. But coming back to the business infrastructure. So fast forward a year, for most of you, this is super viable. I mean, it's possible today. That's just whether you have time in that messy, busy middle to actually build stuff out like this or get the right partner to build it out for you. But fast forward a year, and you've got what I call the brain. And the brain has all this information in, as we've discussed. It has all of your briefs, your documents. You go into a dashboard first thing in the morning. You get your weekly trade report. You get your task list of everything you need to do. And this can happen at an individual level, at strategy level, for you as an employee or for the organization itself. So you get your tasks, the things that you need to do, what's in progress. I look at this and I go, oh my God, this would change my world personally. Then you go into departments and you can see by department what's working, what's not. You come into tasks and you can see the tasks for the week mapped out again by department. In your overview, you've got the weekly trade report, which tells you how you're operating. It tells you if you did this week, and I think this is the problem with reporting, right? A lot of reporting is, this is what happened last week. Brilliant. How does that help me going forward? But reporting should be, if you did this week, we are going to increase our revenue potentially by $50,000, $100,000, $600,000. But then the ability to track that next week and say, okay, we did that. Did it work? No. Okay, we won't do that again then. Or maybe we will, but in a different format. So AI has the ability to track these things, and I think that's where the value comes in. Where you can go back and see if what you're doing is having the right impact on your numbers. So we can see in here you've got your high priorities, your low priorities. And then here, and again, there's Rick and I talk about this a lot, Rick Leathers, who is at Woolies, but we talk about this kind of strategic piece where you've got the strategy of the organization, but how many organizations have their strategy sat in a Google Drive somewhere? No one really knows. We're kind of operating against it, and every quarter we might have a review of the strategy, but who really knows whether what I'm doing on a daily basis is helping me move towards that strategy? Things get lost in the noise, the shiny stuff. All of a sudden I've discovered another AI tool, and everything goes out the window. But in here, you've got the strategy, and you're constantly being pulled back to, are your tasks aligned with the strategy? Are we delivering on KPIs? Then you've got your KPI board, and it tells you, what we see weekly sell-through rate. Are the stores performing? What stores aren't performing? Why not? And then the ability to deep dive and question on that. And then the last one I want to just show you is your agent factory. So eventually you will have the brain and the agents. But these agents won't be like your current organization, which is separate, siloed or departments. They will be agents that talk to each other, that share knowledge, that share information, and give that back to your team to empower them to make better decisions. So a classic example is reviews come into the business and they say this dress size is off. Do we ever go back and look at that dress size and fix it? No, because that sits somewhere in the ether. It's not a workflow. Does customer service know that if that query comes back into the organization, these are the things we need to do? And actually, there's a red alert or an alarm going on over here because we keep seeing this query on our latest product launch. That is when AI starts to free us up to do more of our good work, when we can use it as a loop and a feedback process. So again, I keep talking about the fact that it's not about transformation. It's about slowly but quickly. It's like sprinting slowly. That's how I call it. Like you're running really fast, but you've got to bring your people on the journey. And it's showing them. You know, you can't expect people to start using AI in the right way if you can't show them what good AI looks like. And what good AI looks like is the stuff that's going to make their jobs easier. Or an app that makes it more engaging for customers. It's keeping the human, so making sure there is that approval gate. With Claude, you know, I'm really worried that in the next couple of weeks I'm going to get calls from customers saying they plugged in Shopify connector and we've updated all our product descriptions with the wrong information. It's going to happen. Speaking outcomes, you know, not agents, not workflows. It's like, can we increase our revenue by 600K in the next week based on making this change? And then also promoting the early adopters in your organization. One of the things that I am seeing in organizations that are doing really well in the AI space and moving very quickly is they find those early adopters and they empower them to test and learn and fail. One thing we set up at, when I was at one of the brands I work with, we set up monthly show and tell time. So 2 hours in a room, we all sit and we show and tell what we've been doing with AI. Everyone learns off each other, and there is absolutely free reign to fail, as long as you're not updating your product descriptions in the public format without actually human approval. So I think it's not about bringing someone in to fundamentally transform your process. It's picking one process at a time that's eating your team alive and enabling them and using AI to really make them more efficient and then moving to the next one. But whilst you're doing that, thinking about this brain concept and building the brain as you go. So every time someone builds an agent, ask them, what documentation did you put into that? And is that documentation that's repeatable for other parts of the business that we could use in our brain going forward? Don't transform, execute. Essentially, for me, this next era is about just giving it a bloody go. You know, we've got to kind of dive in and try this stuff and play with it and use it. And the ones that do will win. The ones that don't won't. Hopefully that's been useful. If anyone's got any questions, yeah, go. Yeah.
Lots of talk around Claude at the moment, how it's leaving chat behind and all that sort of stuff. Is this a Coke and a Pepsi thing? Who's got the biggest brand budget? Is ChatGPT really being left behind, or is it they just? Is that going to be out next week? Something's going to take over Claude, or because I mean, right now everyone's going, oh, do I swap to Claude?
Swap to Claude? Yeah.
You know?
And everyone I'm working with has done, pretty much.
Right.
So it's a really good question. I'm getting asked it a lot. So the challenges at the moment is the changes is happening so quickly in terms of the models. There's a couple of things with Claude. It's a much more ethical model than ChatGPT is, and that's all to do with the war and things like that, which I won't go into. So a lot of people that I've worked with have moved over to Claude. The capability, functionality is much better. That said, tomorrow could be ChatGPT. It could leapfrog again. And definitely we're seeing that with images. So the way we build the brain, the way we build the center of your organization is that you have one core model and you allow freedom to test on one or two of the others. But eventually what we want to be able to do is we can switch models out. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what model you base your business on. If you've got the brain as a separate entity that isn't tied primarily to your large language model, you can switch that large language model out at any point in time. So if you build it as a framework as opposed to a technical solution, does that make sense? So at the moment you would build a project in Claude and you put all your information in it, or a custom GPT in Claude. Rather than building it in Claude, you would build your brain separately and allow us to plug the Claude model in or plug the ChatGPT model in where needed. That's where we'll get to. We're not quite there yet, But it's thinking about that layer of what's that documentation I need to take out of Claude, out of ChatGPT, and put in the brain going forward. But Claude is my go-to at the moment. It is more expensive, but well bloody worth it. Yeah, Peter. Sorry.
Hey, Kelly, that was great. I got a very simple question for you based on all the changes that are happening in the world right now. What does Kelly tell her 17-year-old self at the beginning of her career with all of this going on?
Oh, well, that's very easy because I've got a 16-year-old son, so it's exactly what I'm telling my 16-year-old son. Human is the most important thing right now. If you cannot add value over and above an algorithm, you're going to really struggle going forward. So you need to think about how you, and I'm trying to get him to read Unreasonable Hospitality. I don't know if any of you have read that. It's one of my favorite books of all time. But it's how does he go over and above what an algorithm can do? I'm pushing him on creativity. I'm pushing him on human interaction and engagement. And I'm pushing him on using the tools to get ahead. And hopefully not cheating for exams. Yeah. Well, I think he is. No, I'm just kidding. Anyone else?
Kelly.
Hi.
Okay, so, and you sort of touched on it with that first question, but what do you see, or how big do you see the risk of businesses creating dependencies on these platforms? They're somewhat cost effective now. Obviously, when you're using across the entire organisation, becomes reasonably expensive.
Yeah.
When they hold all the keys, yeah, what's your thoughts and strategy for your clients around that?
Yeah, 100%. And again, I think that comes back to my being able to swap in and out. What we are seeing coming out of some of these Chinese models like DeepSeek are phenomenal. But also, what we're also seeing is the cost of those are so much cheaper than your Claude and ChatGPT. Now, whether you have issue with using an LLM in China, that's a personal thing. What I will say is a lot of those models are open source, which means you can run them in your own environment, you can run them locally, and you can run them very securely. And your data never goes past the gate of your data. Does that make sense? So again, if you build your platform as an organization to be able to swap the models in and out and to route based on best cost solution. So for instance, there's one we're building out at the moment where, if it's non-sensitive data, if it's, basic questions, it might be chat, customer service responses. We might use DeepSeek for that because it's a cost-effective model, but it's a high volume. We might then use Claude for TradePack because it's very commercially sensitive information. But it's building the model so that the actual AI doesn't matter, and therefore from a cost perspective you can switch it out. Awesome. Thank you so much. I think I'm done. Yeah.